right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Lauren Cook. I'm your Dean of College and Gap Year Advising at JCHS. This is Coffee with Miss Cook. I'm on to water, but maybe you've got your coffee, orange juice, some other beverage. This is an annual gathering that I do with 10th grade families to kind of do a casual start to the college conversation. But as you get into 11th grade with your student, I do start having these monthly throughout the winter and spring of 11th grade for parents, so that we've got a place for you to connect with me, to ask your questions. It's a moment where the college search is still pretty general across most families. And then senior year, we have many more just individual conversations as things then get pretty specific to your child. But know that this is just the beginning of hopefully a robust relationship for all of us. Couple of quick housekeeping items. Please keep yourself on mute for now. I've got about 15 minutes of content, and then I will open the floor for questions, which you can either do live or we can put in the chat, either way. I also plan this to be an hour. So if we run out of questions before 9, terrific. But if there are still questions, I am going to have a hard stop there. I will send this recording out to everyone. And again, this is just the beginning of our conversations. You can always email me with more questions. Let me know if there's something that didn't get addressed this morning that feels pressing for you. And I will just note that it's purposeful that I'm talking to you all right now as parents and guardians. It's a little early for the kids to get in the weeds with the college conversation. Their job right now is to be high school students, but of course we will be bringing them into the process soon. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what the trajectory looks like at JCHS for the college process timeline. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Got a couple of slides. There we go. Hopefully folks can see that. So as we get started thinking about college admission, I know that this whole conversation can inspire maybe excitement for some of you. You're really ready to do this. It might be anxiety provoking for you. It may just be confusing. This is all valid given our current college landscape. And some of those feelings may be heightened if you didn't attend college altogether, if you didn't attend college in the US. We have a really complex system here. Which is both a strength of our process because there's a huge diversity of options in the United States that's different from a lot of other countries, but it also can be a headache because it is complicated and kind of an ever-moving target. Know that I am very aware, and you may certainly be aware, that with JCHS, like no one size fits all. We've got students that are on a very highly selective path. We've got students that are looking at all types of colleges. We've got students that will aim for the community college system and do the transfer admission guarantee to the UCs. We have some students that may enlist in the IDF that may go on to work. I love that I am counseling for students that are on all different paths. And I want to sort of plant this seed now because know that we all have a lot of stuff around college, around post-high school goals, and the messages that you may be sending to your kids or the judgments that you may place on whether one college is good and another is not. They are internalized, right, by everyone. And sometimes students start parroting that to each other at school, which makes things hard for me because I do want folks to feel supported in whatever their goals and plans are. So be aware that there is a great diversity of things. I'm here to help each student with their own individual path and whatever's important to your family, but that may look different from student to student, right? My goals for today in this first 10 or 15 minutes are to have you get introduced to me so you know who I am, what your resources are around college advising at school. I've got a few tips to give to you to help you think about how to help your kids develop some independent skills that will be useful for them in the college process. There's not a lot of college-specific stuff they need to be doing right now beyond working on, their grades and being involved at school or with extracurriculars outside of school. But there are some independent skills that will be useful in life, but also with the college admission process that I'll mention. I'm going to give you a preview of the path and the process that we kind of have in place at JCHS so you know what will be coming in their 11th and 12th grade years. And my goal is just to talk for like 15 minutes here and then to open things up for Q&A. So that is the plan. Hope it sounds good. A reminder for folks just joining us that this is being recorded. Okay, so a little introduction to me. I've been doing college admission counseling for 25 years. Really, I started it right after I graduated from my undergraduate degree. I worked at a selective liberal arts college and then have been at JCHS now for this is my 8th year, which is great. I have read thousands of essays. I've given hundreds of interviews. I've conducted hundreds of workshops, often with other college peers. So I have not just my own personal institutional experiences, but exposure to a vast range of opinions on what makes a good college application. So I feel pretty prepared, obviously, to advise your students. And I've worked on both coasts. I have an extensive network of colleagues who, as we call it in this industry, working on both sides of the desk, both on the high school side and then on the college side. So I know some best practices. I know where my resources are when new questions come up to help figure out answers to navigating all of this. And I'm a member of several professional organizations, both regionally here in California and then nationally. And I've held some leadership roles in the field. I present to my peers regularly, and I go to conferences regularly to also make sure that I'm receiving training and updates that are really important as this landscape changes quite a bit. In fact, I'll be out of school on Wednesday because there is a regional conference happening at the now Mills Northeastern campus. I think that's what they're calling it, as Northeastern University has purchased the Mills College location. So that's a bit about me. There's more stuff on the website if you feel like you want to know more. But I want to get into here some things that you can think about with your kids over the next 10 months to help them develop some skills that are going to be really useful as they launch into the college process. So I've got a bit of a list here. Some of these may be obvious, some maybe not. The first is to practice small talk with adults. So know that starting next fall, juniors are all welcome to come to college visits that happen at JCHS. We have usually 80 to 100 college reps that visit the school every year, do a presentation, answer questions from kids. And that is just going to continue this exposure to strangers that want to make small talk with them about the college process. There may be interviewing, there will be emails back and forth with reps, as we'll get to with my next point in a moment. So whether it's family gatherings you're having, neighbors at shul, some of your kids may be naturally gregarious and friendly and happy to talk with folks that they don't know. But some of them may be more introverted, shy, less confident. And this is something where we want to push them on that growth edge a little bit so that they start becoming more comfortable introducing themselves, maybe doing the handshake if that's something we're doing post-COVID, and feeling like they can navigate something with an adult stranger because that will be important. Similarly, drafting emails to adults. This is something they may already be working on at school if they are sending emails to their faculty. But if you are sending emails to their faculty, you might want to start working with them on nudging them to start picking up a little bit of that communication. Because I hear over and over from college reps that while parents have a perfectly reasonable role in, say, planning a visit to campus, you're working as the travel agent for them, and that might require you to interface with an admission office a bit. They want to hear from the student. The student is the one that is going off to college. So if your child doesn't know, and many of them don't because they're used to communicating on like Snapchat, how to say, dear Mr. So-and-so, now we hit return and make a space. And then we write things in a few sentences that's not just one big text blob. And then we hit return and sign our names. It's amazing the formatting that I'm just having to do with students because they will come to me as well about, looking over emails they're sending to college reps. But help them with this. This is something that may be innate to us because we are from a different era in terms of technological use and writing letters and all of that, but they're not. So they need some help with formatting and thinking about appropriate tone and lingo and all of that. The next one is thinking about starting a resume, and I use that word very loosely to track their high school involvement. So this doesn't necessarily have to be something heavily formatted. This is not like they're applying for jobs the way we are as professionals in the workforce. But if you don't have just even a basic list, kind of keeping track of the things they've been involved with during high school, or if something persisted from middle school or earlier, say they've been taking piano lessons since they were in third grade, to start putting that down on paper and keeping track of, was there a leadership position, or what was their role on the soccer team? What position did they play? What year did they start doing those piano lessons? They will need to, when it comes time to fill out applications in senior year, regurgitate all of this on an activities list. And so it is so helpful if we're not in September of senior year and trying to parse out some of these details and checking this award date and that award date. So, so start keeping track of these things now. Community service, if they've done any employment work, summer camps, anything they're doing with their time, start a bit of a brainstorming list of those things and just keep that on a Google Doc somewhere that they can add to over the next few years. It will make filling out the actual applications much easier when that time comes. Managing deadlines independently. Even just managing deadlines, and that with some help from you. While I know that we philosophically at JCHS allow students some flexibility around deadlines, around redos, around extensions, and sometimes that will be okay, when they're in college if they are ill or whatnot and need to have some deadline extensions. But I joke often with my colleagues at school that the first time sometimes that our students run into a really firm and fixed hard deadline is the college admission process. And what I don't want is for them to not take that seriously. So helping them think about deadlines concretely, and that they need to start thinking about these things without perhaps your regular reminders, their teachers' regular reminders. I do all sorts of reminders as we're into senior year, but we need to start the messaging as we get into maybe this summer and next fall. The deadlines are important to keep track of, and figuring out some of the best executive functioning methods for them to take care of that. Because when we do have an application deadline, a financial aid deadline, those things are hard and fixed. And I will often have Miss Cook deadlines beforehand to try and, cushion the blow. If they breeze past mine, we at least can hit the actual one. But thinking about these things now and starting to develop the muscle around that is really good. And then this last one is an independent life skill, generally about finding their way around somewhere unfamiliar, but also really important as they think about, they might go to college on the other side of the country. They might be navigating airports alone. They might need to be able to figure out how to get on public transit from that airport and get to their college campus. And I think JCHS students are uniquely positioned to do this better, especially if they have a commute. Some of your kids may be starting to figure some of this out on their own. But if not, or if they're fully dependent on their phone, which, as we all know, they forget to charge sometimes, they need to figure out how to navigate some of these things on their own. And I have a very specific memory of this, my senior year of high school, when I took a little girls' trip with my mom to St. Louis, and we got off the plane, and she said, "Okay, why don't you figure out how we get to our hotel?" And I was livid. I could not believe that she was I'm supposed to just follow my mom around, like the adults are in charge, right? Well, it was a moment where I had to test my skills. And when I look back on that now, I think like that was actually really useful. And I don't know that I spoke to her for a lot of the rest of the day. So know that there will be some trauma around this. But even if it's just like going to the Cal campus and being like, help me find the admission office, to really push them to figure some things out in the world on their own. Okay, I'm going to transition now into talking about college advising at JCHS, so you have a little bit of a sense of what's coming. This summer, late this summer, so probably early August, I will send out invitations to all of you, and I'll send an email in advance so you know it's coming, for our college software, which is called SCORE. And this is a website that's linked to JCHS. And so I can look into your student's account. You can look into your student's account. If you have multiple kids, they would each have their own SCORE account. And this is how we're going to organize the college search. It's where we're going to keep lists of schools that they're thinking about. You can put suggestions in there. I can put suggestions in there. And then as students move into the deciding where they're going to apply and where they actually apply, I send materials to colleges through SCORE electronically. So it will start out as a bit of an organizational tool for us, and then it becomes pretty important as a record of where they've actually actually applied and who has received everything they need from JCHS. So that will happen in August. And then in fall, we will start having those college reps coming. I think this is the time to shop. This is a moment where kids are trying on possible me's for the future, right? What would I be like if I'm at a UC? What would I be like at a women's college? What's a small liberal arts college for me versus a mid-sized school? They don't have to have a set idea that they want to go to every school whose visit they attend. They're not going to know what those are until they attend some visits. So I would say aim to attend 5. If it's more than that, great. Sometimes, kids have a study hall that ends up having more visits than others. They are allowed to get out of class if they want. If they start going to 15, 20 college visits, I am going to just check in with them but to make sure that they are actually keeping up with their academic work. So I do monitor if they are starting to make the rounds of all the college visits. But those will happen in the fall. And then in the winter, we will have a kickoff night. I believe it's the first week of December. I usually do that on Zoom so that everybody has access to it and it's recorded. And then we will get into questionnaires for everyone to do, having an initial meeting with your child and making a draft college list for them. We'll then keep working on that list throughout next spring and into the summer. There may be some testing, there may not, and you may have some questions about the role of testing in the process now. They will do a college essay draft in their junior English class. It's the last assignment in 11th grade so that they can practice working on that Common App essay, writing in the first person. And we hope that in the spring, you're going to go visit some colleges and maybe into next summer and just get a sense aesthetically on the ground what different campuses feel like. And then, into the summer, we're going to narrow down that college list, do some more visits, etc. Senior year, they will work on their applications as we get into the fall. I do a lot of drop-in hours during flex block after school. There will be more college visits. In senior year, this is really the time where they're going to the visits for the schools that they're interested in. They might have visited campus already, but it's good to have FaceTime with the rep who usually is responsible for JCHS students. They'll finalize their list. In the winter, we're finalizing writing, we're getting applications in. Some of the earliest deadlines are usually November 1st of senior year, but then things get spread off into really early February. So there's a big runway for actual deadlines there. And then you may be applying for financial aid. You may be thinking about a gap year. So those applications typically are due a little bit after college applications. And then we make a final enrollment decision in the spring. Most admission decisions usually land February, March-ish for seniors. I make it sound all so easy and quick, right? So then a couple of final things as I wrap up here and we can open the floor for questions. Know that I've informally started talking with your kids or maybe you about course scheduling for next year and how that may or may not impact some college plans. Formally, we will begin this process there, December 4th, with the college kickoff. That's a Wednesday night. If students have periodic questions, they are welcome to email me, set up a time to talk, and I will see them in the fall college visits. I always like to pay attention to who's showing up to what and the questions they're asking or not asking, and just get a sense of what they're interested in through that. And know that I can absolutely entertain other questions and things via email, but I really do need to preserve my time both this spring and early next fall for the juggling that I'm doing with the current juniors and seniors and then the rising seniors at the beginning of next fall as we get their applications launched out the door. But you should also know that I have some support this year, which is working out well, from Dr. Lessie, who teaches the AP Lit class, as well as some of our sophomore English classes. She is doing some essay review with me as well to make sure that we're able to see everything that students are getting out the door before they actually apply. So know that while I do carry a fair amount of the load here, I do have some support with her. So I'm going to pause there, stop sharing my screen, get back to all of you, and see what questions you might have. And you are welcome to put something in the chat. You're welcome to raise your Zoom hand. I know that will then queue you up so we can have you talk live if you want. But I'm curious to know either something that's on your mind or if there's a little myth busting we can do, anything specific to JCHS. What can I help with? Yeah, Renan, if that's how you say it. And I think you're on mute, so probably want to unmute. There we go.
I'm
Perfect.
trying to look for a good angle because there's too much light. Sorry. My name is Renan. I'm Asaf Reitman's mom, and I know that I'm very new to the system, so I might be asking a question that's obvious to everyone else. But about college visits, do we have to coordinate them? Is there anything specific we should be planning towards? Is there specific itinerary, you like specific things you do in those? I don't know. Thanks.
Great question. Yes. So I do recommend getting on some actual college campuses. This does not have to be an incredibly expensive long distance thing, especially early on. I think that it's really important for students to see 4 or 5 places before they start to have a real sense of what they might be looking for. And so I think you could do local visits here just in the Bay Area, even if you don't think your student wants to go to USF or you don't want them to go to USF. There is great value in going to a private urban college campus, taking the tour there and seeing how that size, it's a mid-sized school, feels versus going to take a tour at Berkeley or Davis or one of the UCs that's nearby and how a much larger research university feels to them. So I think it is important to go check out a couple types of schools early on and just see if your student has a strong reaction one way or another. Some folks feel overwhelmed on a UC campus after being at a place like JCHS. Some feel so liberated and excited about it, right? So just some of those early metrics are great. And in terms of the logistics of it, literally, if you Google UC Davis campus tours, you should get their page to schedule a campus visit. And most campuses are going to bundle an information session and a tour together. And you can literally pick a day and they will tell you what's available on that day, what the timing looks like. They usually offer 2 or 3 of those kind of packages in one day. Yeah, so it's often like a 2-hour experience, the actual visit itself. So you might sit in the admission office and hear from an admission officer and a student, or maybe a faculty member. They often have a couple of different speakers that will talk generally about the framework of the school and a bit about the admission process. And then you'll have a current student that takes you out on a tour of the campus. Davis is the caveat to that. It's a long tour. It's a big campus. So it might be like an hour-and-a-half tour. But other places, it may be shorter than that. But that, I think, is enough of a basic overview. And after that, make your way on to the next place. You don't have to visit every place the student is thinking about applying before they apply. But I do think doing a few visits, even locally, just for the standing in the middle of the campus and seeing what college really looks like is super important. I do also have a college advising handbook, which I'm seeing the questions stack up in the chat, and I will get to those in a moment, but let me just pull up. I'm going to drop this in the chat as a link. If you haven't looked at the college advising handbook, know that it is 30 pages of really great college information, but you can do it in bite-sized chunks. And let me just put this to everyone in the meeting. There are 2 pages on visiting a college campus with some recommendations about what to do and how to do it. And if you do have more time, or certainly if it's a second visit back to a campus, what are some of the more in-depth things you could do, like sitting in on a class or just having lunch in the dining hall and seeing what the options are? Do they have kosher food or whatnot? Checking out the halal, some of the other, things to look at it once you're beyond the tour and information session. Okay, so now I'm going to dig into what we've got in the chat here. We are very keen on gap years. Is there a resource we can access on things that are often explored? Absolutely. There's also 2 pages in the handbook on gap years. That is a great starter place. And I've got a number of links in there for popular programs and guidelines. There's some basic stuff to know, like most schools will allow you to defer your admission for a year. So I still encourage folks thinking about a gap year to apply in senior year with their peers. But the one big exception to that are the California State universities. So if a student's really intent on going to Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, for example, they will not let you do a gap year. So that is something where you might need to apply during the gap year. And the UCs have some wordsmithing around gap years, but usually we can navigate that. So getting some basic understanding of who will allow it and who won't. And then whether you're thinking about Israel, which is where most of our students go, it's usually a quarter to a third of our senior class each year that chooses a gap year. Usually 95% of those are headed to Israel, but we always have one or two, if not more, that are looking at other options that might be within the US, might be abroad. So I would start with the College Advising Handbook for that. And then know that a couple of the big websites for gap years, in Israel, many of the non-yeshiva and seminary programs fall under MASA, M-A-S-A, MASA Israel Journey. I went on a trip that they funded last year to Israel, saw 15 different programs of theirs, including 4 that are on college campuses at Hebrew University, at Bar Ilan, whatnot. Phenomenal programs, phenomenal kids. They also offer some funding for those programs. Most yeshivas and seminaries run their own processes, but do have some umbrella organizations, and that might be something more to discuss with some of our Jewish studies faculties, Ms. Rabinowitz, Rabbi Brick. They, depending on a student's level of observance and what they're looking for, the Hebrew knowledge required, they can help with more granular advising around that. And then if you're thinking about all options outside of Israel too, the website gooverseas.com is terrific. They have really great filters. So you can put, I want to do art in Europe that's English speaking. And I just recently did this. You'll find that they're mostly Irish programs, but we may have a junior looking to go to Ireland to do that. So Go Overseas is great, and everything's pretty vetted on there. So they are programs that have been around for a minute and are obviously safe to send your children to. But we'll talk more about gap years going forward. Very, very popular option and something that's wrapped into my questionnaires and early college advising. Okay, what do you suggest is the best thing to do in the summer? Well, with college admission, I'm going to say a lot. It depends. There is no one best thing that's like the silver bullet summer activity, but there can be a best thing for your child. I think that, first of all, doing something. And yes, we want to allow the kids to have at least a week or two of just decompression. And if all they want to do is play some video games during that time, watch Netflix, fine. But having something then structured for some part of the summer would be great. And whether that's being a camper or a counselor at a Jewish summer camp, whether that's having a job, being a Starbucks barista or bagging groceries at Safeway, whether that's doing a camp somewhere. I know there's students interested in engineering. There's a great summer program here in the Bay Area called Blue Stamp Engineering. You like make a robot or program a Raspberry Pi, do something for a month. That can really help them develop some skills. JFCS, the Jewish Family and Children's Services, offers an internship, kind of an out-of-the-box program where you can apply to get an internship with them, and then they help place you somewhere so that you don't have to do all of the legwork yourself on finding that opportunity. All of these things are great. You may go to Israel for the summer and see family, or want to have a family vacation in Europe. That's fine. That's terrific. I think it's less about what they're doing, but what they got out of it. Can they talk about it on a college application? Have they made any reflection on that? Does it at some point or another help build their narrative in their college application? So if someone is interested in engineering is really competitive right now. And so besides taking some curricular work at JCHS that is going to give them the academic skills, try doing something during a summer or two that also exposes them to that industry, shows that they are invested and serious about it. And also just, for your student to make sure this is actually what they think is engineering, right? So any of these things during the summer can be terrific, but I would try and find something, community college class or whatnot, that they can engage in, that will give them a little bit of structure and something to put on that activities list. Question about how many colleges on average are kids applying to? So the average number for a JCHS student is about 10. It's like 10.2 or something last year. And I generally advise our students to be looking somewhere between 8 and 12-ish. Some only end up applying to 1 or 2, especially if they access some of those early programs. We don't have to get too into the weeds with all the terminology, but there are, some strategic choices students may make around their first choice school, where if they apply early decision, they get in, they're going there. So then we withdraw the other applications, and that counts as they just did 1. Other students on the other end of the spectrum, especially folks who have tremendous financial need, and we know that the college process has gotten pretty expensive, may apply to up to 15 or 16 schools, which I don't love. But if the student really has done their homework, knows these schools, they're a good fit for them, we've got a range of types that they're likely to get into, that are possible, that are reaches, then it makes sense for us to make sure we've got a broad swath of financial offers to choose from, to make sure that they're not just getting into college, but that they can go, right? That it's affordable for your family. But on average, it comes out to about 10. And that includes, so like you fill out the UC application once and you can send it to multiple UCs. That includes each individual UC. So I try, there's no point in inflating everybody's applicant pool. You see these media reports of a kid applied to 50 colleges. That's bananas. And it's really expensive for you because most colleges have an application fee that's $70 or $80. So we want to keep this strategic and intentional and choices that are realistic, both for your child to get into and for you to be able to pay for. Question about gap years. How would that work? Do they apply to college before the gap year or during it? I talked about this a little bit, but I'll be more explicit. So almost all of our students choose to apply to a 4-year college during senior year. Whether they are thinking about a gap year or not, whether they're not sure whether they're going to go to college or get into college, all of that. But I think we want to keep as many doors open as possible for as long as possible. And I do think when the peer culture is around filling out applications, when you've got access to me, the faculty members to write letters of recommendation, all of that, to go through the process senior year makes the most sense. But I keep all of that material on file. So let's say a student doesn't get into places that there were top choices, but they're planning to do a gap year. They may go off to do that gap year and then still be engaging with me. We will Zoom, we'll do some more app writing. They might apply again during that gap year and then, secure their place when their gap year is finished. But most students choosing a gap year will file their applications in November, December of senior year. They will then be filing gap year applications. Some of the earliest ones are for seminaries. Those are typically due in early December. But the rest, it's more of a January through, even April or May. There are some gap programs that'll take you, 2-3 weeks before they leave. But get the gap applications in the winter. And then we keep the cards close to the chest. So we wait and see what you hear back from colleges, make a college decision, and get some information about how they view gap years, obviously. And I'm happy to run interference on that so that it's not about an individual student contacting an office and sort of showing their cards that I don't think I'm going to enroll next year, but I want to know your gap idea. But then they enroll at a college, they say I'm coming, and then there is deferral paperwork that you can do that's pretty perfunctory at most places, saying, I plan to take a gap year, I will enroll the following fall. They usually want a sentence or two about what you're going to do with that time. So it doesn't have to be a program. Lots of our kids do formal programs, but it could be, I'm going to do some search and rescue in the fall. I'm going to be working in the spring to save money for college. As long as there's some framework for the year, they will say yes. And then they'll check in with you about halfway through your gap year to make sure you still plan to enroll the following year. So that's the general trajectory. Given that we don't want kids to choose colleges just based on friendships, oh yes, what are your thoughts on the kids planning college visits together? I think that can be great because anything that boosts some excitement and enthusiasm around this process and seeing themselves in a different academic framework in the future can be helpful. Because I know there are some segment of kids that are just dragging their feet through this process because it's scary, right? To think about being an adult, being on their own life after JCHS. So I would never say don't visit with your friends, especially if that's going to be like the one way they agree to visit. But I do think that some differentiation will come somewhat naturally in senior year as I'm working with them about the things that they are interested in. As their decisions may vary, they may want to go to the same place, but that doesn't always happen. And really the moment of let's talk about whether you're just following your friend or your boyfriend or girlfriend off somewhere comes when we get to the point of making some enrollment decisions. And I run robust interference with them, as I'm sure you might as well, as we get to those kind of conversations. So I think it's okay if they're visiting colleges together. Okay, a question about should students take the SAT in the summer? Let's talk about testing. So you've probably seen a lot in the media in the past few weeks if you watch college admission media. Maybe you don't, and bless you if you don't. But the testing situation continues to be sort of murky waters here since the pandemic, as so many places went test optional. Our entire public system in California is test free. You do not need, and in fact, they don't want an SAT or an ACT from your student to go to a UC or a CSU. But in the meantime, Dartmouth and Yale in the last 2 weeks have both said we are going back to requiring testing. And so some folks feel like that means now everybody is going to need to do testing again. So I will just clarify a couple of things before I talk about the SAT this summer. The testing landscape, for better or for worse, is incredibly varied right now, but we still have the vast majority of schools, and there are 4,000 some colleges in this country that are test optional, if not test free, that subset that I said of UCs and CSUs. And I don't see that radically changing anytime soon, as Dartmouth and Yale got a lot of press because all the major media likes to talk about fancy Ivy League schools. What was lost in some of that is that at the same time, I'm going to list off some schools, all of these places reaffirmed or made permanent their test optional policies. Boston University, Cornell, Columbia, Emory, Harvard, University of Michigan, Vanderbilt, William and Mary. That didn't get the same level of press, right? Because it's not sexy to say, we're doing the same thing we've always done. So I am keeping an eye on this. I will keep you as informed as humanly possible. We've got a lot of time before your kids are applying to college. But whether testing is required or not, I do not think doing anything this summer is productive around test prep. I think that for most students, unless they scored sky high on the PSAT this past fall, you were getting reports that they were in like the 99th percentile or whatnot. Every student benefits from having some of that curricular time in junior year to continue strengthening their math and English skills. They may end up taking the ACT, so I don't want to be totally SAT focused. These are tests that are both looked at equally by every college in the country. This has been the case for 25 years now. What we will start to do in next fall is they will take the PSAT again on PSAT day at school, and we will see how things might have developed since they're testing this past fall. They will have the option to take a practice ACT at school that I arrange. We will then look at what those two test scores look like. And did they sort of do better on one than another? I have correlation charts to look at. Oftentimes, students with more complex learning profiles or just generally math weaknesses find that the ACT is their test. But you haven't typically had exposure to the ACT until we do this practice test next fall. And then when we look at these two test scores in probably November, December of next year, and if one is better than another, and overlay that with what is starting to be the types of schools they might be interested in, I'll give them kind of a prescription on whether, A, I think they need to continue testing at all, And we've had about a third of our seniors for the past couple of years do no testing at all. They might do AP tests, but not SAT or ACT testing because they didn't need to. And they weren't going to score in a high enough range to make it something they would want to submit to a test optional school. And then the rest do some prep in the winter and the spring of junior year, start taking the test in the spring of junior year. They might take it again over the summer or into the early fall of senior year. I don't think it makes sense. Most students will do the test twice. Some will do it 3 times. Do not take any of these tests more than 3 times. You will hit a testing plateau and start to see declining returns. So that's the general landscape of testing. But if you've got individual questions about your student, please let me know. Just send me an email and we can talk about your specific thoughts. Question about, do you help deciding about what school is best for my child? I sure do, but obviously with everybody else's input. So when we formally start the process with the kickoff night in December, I will send questionnaires out to the parents and guardians and to the students that have a lot of questions about all sorts of things, including, are there schools you're thinking about? Are there schools important to your family? But the most important pieces for me are, what do they think are their academic strengths? You know, where do they see themselves thriving? How important is Jewish community? What extracurriculars are they invested in? And I run all this through all sorts of filters to make a suggested list of 15 or 20 schools for each student. And those lists can look very different depending on who your child is. But I'm just kind of throwing stuff at the wall, right? Because I'm just getting to know you and your student. And so then we're going to work, which is what I'm doing with the juniors right now over these next couple of months on refining that list. There are things they're going to throw out. There's things they're going to add. There's things I might continue adding. There's things you might add. That's where some of these visits are important, even going to virtual information sessions online, just kind of getting a sense, again, and fine tuning what's going to be the right fit for them. So I absolutely have opinions and suggestions, but this is not, I'm not going to college, right? Your child is. So we want to make sure that they feel like they're in tune with what you all are looking for. There's a question about if JCHS recommends GAP programs. And if so, which ones? We don't have strong recommendations because, again, it really depends on each individual student. And because the majority are going to Israel, people have a lot of different goals with what they want to do at that time. For some, it's Jewish learning, it's advancing in their Hebrew. For some, it's, you know, interning and traveling and service. And so different programs offer different things. But I do know, and again, in the handbook the link I put in the chat, there's a couple of the most popular programs listed in there where we know that students have had a great experience. They're longstanding programs with really good structures. When things happened on October 7th, I felt confident that our kids were safe and some of those programs were moved different places and whatnot. So there are more established places that we might recommend. But there's no, you know, one sort of program that I think is a one size fits all. Question about, is it too soon to take a tour? Should we wait until next year? Take a tour whenever you want. Tours are great. Information sessions are great. All of that data is helpful, especially building towards filling out the questionnaire for me. The more you and your student know about what they might be looking for and what's out there, the better. But also, if your child is completely blocked on doing all of this right now, that's fine too. It's not, you know, going to be too late if they haven't done a tour by junior year. What I will say that you don't want to do too early is an interview. And some colleges will offer interviews as part of the visit experience. I would say always leave interviews for senior year when the student is their most mature, they're most poised, they're most knowledgeable about the school they might be interviewing for. If they want to practice interviewing, do that with me. And I also bring admission reps in just before school starts in senior year. We have a bit of a boot camp on college admission. And the students can practice interviewing with one of those reps at that workshop. But the formal stuff, save that for senior year. Okay, this question, is the handbook online to access later? Yes. So if you go to the JCHS website, you don't have to log in. It's just on the main page for college advising, which I think is under the academics tab. Just scroll down the page, you'll see there's a bunch of resources that are linked there, and the handbook is like the second one. So that is always living there on the college advising website. And I will push it out periodically in emails to y'all to remind you that it's there. But it covers everything from, there's some timeline stuff about what to be thinking about at different points during the 4 years at JCHS, how to visit a campus, advice on interviews, basic gap year advice, basic financial aid advice. There's a glossary in the back with some college lingo. So if you don't know, CSU is a California State University. You can go to the index and look at that. So if you are not so familiar, if this is your first child to college, you haven't been to college in the US, some of that can be helpful just to understand the terminology we'll be throwing around. Then there's a question about how much influence APs have on grades. So I'm going to disaggregate that question a little bit, because the influence APs have are a couple of different ways. So an advanced placement class is meant to simulate college level discourse. We offer about 16 of them at JCHS. On average, our students might take a couple. Sometimes sophomores will choose to take AP US History. That might be the first AP they would access. Many don't, and that's fine. In junior year and senior year, I think it is helpful to attempt thinking about one, maybe two. Some of our kids go all the way in and do more than that. But especially in areas of strength for you, things that you feel like you want to learn more, there you have some either natural interest or proclivity for it, definitely do something with a bit more rigor. They can affect your grade in terms of like your GPA, in that they are weighted, because it's considered sort of college level discourse, rather than an A in an AP class being worth 4.0 in your GPA calculation. You get a 1 point boost. So an A in an AP class is actually a 5.0. So when we're adding up someone's cumulative GPA, those weighted classes, so when we talk about weighted classes, that's what we mean, something with an AP designation, can boost things by 1. So if you get a B in it, that's a 4.0 in your calculation. But honors classes also at JCHS. So senior year, you can do Jew Thought honors. You can take filmmaking honors. We have a handful of honors classes. Those have a 0.5 weighting to them. This is very mathematical and in the weeds for most of you, but they can help, if you do well, bring your GPA into more rarefied air. Folks often ask, should I take an AP if I'm going to get a B, or should I take the at-level class and know that I'm going to get an A? And an admission rep maddeningly will say to you, well, take the AP and get an A. That's what they, sort of ideally want to see. I would say if you want to challenge yourself and you're worried you're going to get a B, like that's okay. Like a B is fine. But if you are going to be overwhelmed, if you are going to be treading water madly through a lot of that class because it is, potentially a little too difficult for you, and you might get below a B, C's, D's, F's, that's not helping in terms of the big picture on your transcript. So this is what your advisors are for. This is what your current faculty are for. This is why we make recommendations to students, because we want students to succeed. We want students to thrive in classes that are the appropriate fit for them. Colleges do look to see what we have to offer in terms of rigor at JCHS and what a student has chose to access from that. So when you say have an influence, APs can also have an influence on your college admission if you have chosen to access them. Again, this all varies wildly depending on how selective a college is and all the rest. But choosing to have thoughtfully and intentionally engaged in a couple of more rigorous classes, whether that's advanced Bible and commentaries, or whether that's honors photography, or whether that's AP language, that all says good things to colleges about pushing yourself a little bit in areas that you might be interested in and excel in. In terms of AP scores, there's a test you can take at the end of the year. Not everybody takes it. Colleges don't make assumptions. Every high school has different policies. If you're required to take it, if they don't even offer the test, everybody knows it costs money to take them. It's an equity issue. So you don't have to submit your AP test scores on your college applications. You can, and especially if you've done really well, again, it can be an additional data point that's helpful for you. But the AP test scores themselves can be kind of value neutral in the grand scheme of things. So if your kids are going to take some AP classes, I'd encourage them to take the test, and then we can decide later what they do with that test score. At the end of the day, that test score can also give them credit when they go off to college. So typically, if they get a 4 or a 5, the tests are on a scale of 1 to 5. A 4 to 5 will typically earn you college credit at the school you enroll in. So, you can enter college a little bit ahead of the game with a couple of credits already. And sometimes people graduate a little early or have more flexibility to do a study abroad program where the credit transferring is a little, nebulous. So there's a lot of reasons to do an AP class. But, listen to your advisor, to me, to your faculty members in terms of how many is too many, which ones might be too much, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, that was such a long answer. Okay, one last question in the chat, and I will name it's 8:52, so we will stop at 9 or before if there aren't more questions. Do interviews influence decisions? I think that an interview is rarely going to push you over the finish line. The most important piece of a college application is always going to be the student's transcript. Both the classes that they've chosen to take, everything I just said about rigor, that colleges are looking to see over the 4 years, how has their rigor perhaps advanced a little bit? Are there areas they're really strong in, like STEM, and they're saying they want to be a STEM major, so that all makes sense. And then what the grades look like. Are they successful in the choices they've made? Are they on an upward trajectory? A lot of kids have some transitional time during freshman year, and that's to be expected. So the transcript, that's the meat of an application. And then everything else starts to sort of confirm or complicate that. So the writing, learning about the student's personality, interests, passions, values, things that are important to them, that can add nuance to things. Recommendation letters, if a college asks for them, you hear from a third party or two, how great your student is. They might have some testing, and so that's a data point or not, and that's okay. An interview is like another data point. And so unless a child is very socially awkward or shy, or does something bizarre, which I had every once in a while as a college rep interviewing students, it really hurts. I think if a college offers interviews, it's a good thing to do, and it brings more personality to the paperwork. Where I think you can have a bit of positive influence is at smaller places where you're potentially interviewing with someone who might read your application. When those reps come visit JCHS, they are often also doing interviews that weekend at a Starbucks or in their hotel lobby or whatnot. And as they get to know your student, this is certainly true for me as an admission rep, the process becomes a little bit less objective, right? Because we're all humans getting to know each other. And so they start rooting for the student in a different way. So I think that can be helpful. But if you're an inadmissible student, a really great interview, a really charismatic personality, it's not going to sort of boost you over the finish line, if that makes sense. I just think it's another piece of things that can keep affirming their decision moving towards admitting you, or in rare cases, give them a moment of I don't know about this child. So, but I'm happy to help advise you and your child about accessing interviews and whether it's a smart thing for them to do. Question, will you be telling students all this year? I will not. As I said at the very beginning, this is meant to start very purposefully with parents and guardians, to start giving you guys some information, because I'm going to be honest, in the 10th grade year, it's typically the parents that are more anxious about this than the students. But I will, as we get into the summer, as we start sending some score emails, and then starting in the fall, I will be part of their opening day junior class meeting with the start of next school year. And then I will start having some slowly ramping up touch points with them around all of this. So I will encourage all of you, as a side note, when they come home from school today, do not just regurgitate all of this onto them, please. Hold back. You have got more information now that is hopefully going to make you feel more confident about the process. But I like to be, gentle with the students in easing into all of this, because some students are ready to go and some are completely panicked. And I will just say that it is not uncommon, and I take no offense, that a lot of 10th graders can't even make eye contact with with me at school because I represent a thing that makes them incredibly anxious, and that's all right. They don't need me really until junior year. Okay. It seems like it would be good for them to know going into junior year. Yes. Well, I did last year, and I'll probably try and do again, a little Zoom that is optional for folks to come to for both students and parents, the week before classes start next year. And so I'll look back at my records and see how many folks attended and whatnot, but I'm happy to engage with the folks that are ready and willing to do so. Okay, there's one more question here, and then I think we're going to call it. You mentioned something about transferring to a UC from a community college. Can you talk about that? Absolutely. Great note to end on. So we are really blessed in California to have a phenomenal community college system. There are 123 community college campuses all around the state. You may be familiar with Skyline or College of Marin. I'm here in Alameda with College of Alameda. These are 2-year institutions where you get an associate's degree. And for some students, that's fine. They might be pursuing a trade. You know, if you want to be a mechanic or a plumber or electrician, you can do that kind of credential at a community college. But many of our students are going to a community college with the intent after those 2 years to transfer and finish their 4-year degree somewhere else. And they could do that at a private college or an out-of-state institution, but many will access what we have in the state called the Transfer Admission Guarantee, TAG program, TAG. And there is a transfer admission guarantee to 5 of the UC campuses. And students from the community colleges that are in a TAG program have preference at the rest of the UCs for transfer admission. It's not guaranteed, but it's preference. And those are some of the most selective UCs. So UCLA, Berkeley, I think San Diego, and maybe Irvine don't have the guarantee, but the rest do. And basically, if you follow, and it's like the general ed curriculum, so you're getting your general education requirements out of the way at that community college, it is much less expensive than being at a 4-year institution to pay community college tuition for those 2 years. Community colleges do not have an admission process. You sign up for classes. You don't have to do all this, competition to access their curriculum. And there is a TAG counselor, a transfer counselor there on campus to help you with that process. And I have a good friend who works in transfer admission at Berkeley. She said that most years, 95% of their transfer students coming in are coming from California community colleges. And sometimes if folks, so some students may choose to stay at home here in the Bay Area and access Skyline classes. Great. That's the most, cost-effective way to start college. But some of you may be ready for your child to leave at that point, and your child may be ready to leave after they've graduated from high school. So some community colleges do have some housing affiliated with them. And if it's a direct feeder school to a UC, sometimes that can be smart for them to do. So we've had some students pick up and move to Santa Barbara, go to Santa Barbara City College for 2 years, TAG program, and then direct transfer into UC Santa Barbara. And that was the end goal, the end game. And when you graduate from the 4-year college, your diploma doesn't have an asterisk on it saying they started at community college. It says you're a graduate of UC Santa Barbara. So this is an option to keep in your back pocket to know about. It is affordable. It's pretty dependable. The one thing to know about a community college, and I'll wrap up here, I see it's 9 o'clock, is that because everybody can access a community college, the peer culture there can vary wildly, right? You're in class with adults, with veterans, with students who maybe bombed high school and are sort of redoing their academic records so that they are an appealing transfer candidate. And so some students, this may not be the best path for them if they need a lot of scaffolding, advising, positive peer culture around that next step. But for the students who are relatively driven, independent, have some solid executive functioning, I think it can be a really good path to just keep in mind. Okay, with that, I've talked so much. I hope this has been helpful, and we'll send the recording out probably by the middle of the week whenever Mr. McDonald can get to it. But it's been good to get some opening exposure to all of you, and please email me if more questions come up, and I will look forward to working with you and your students on their journey. Have a good one.